We have to re-examine our national military strategy. We have to back away from this very expansive, Cold War-oriented, enemy-seeking military strategy. We've got to get out of what Madison called going abroad in search of monsters to destroy. That's what we've been doing now for a long time. It needs to stop.
Colonel Macgregor was awarded the Bronze Star in the First Gulf War for his battlefield heroics. But with a doctorate in international relations, he is now as much a strategist as a warrior. After publishing a book calling for major military reform, his Army career came to an end. He kept writing, leading the charge for those who think the entire military posture of the United States is long past due for a radical rethink. And he says that can't happen as long as Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, a holdover from the Bush administration, is running the show.
Secretary Gates is not a reformer. He's run a very slick public relations campaign. And this public relations campaign has been helped along by people in the mainstream media anxious to be supportive and anxious for things to continue, for the status quo to survive. Look at the defense budget. It continues to rise. It is larger than it's ever been.
Colonel Macgregor says a lot of that money goes to big weapons systems built on a military approach left over from the Cold War. But he also is critical of the expensive counterinsurgency strategy associated with General David Petraeus in both Iraq and now Afghanistan, where the latest numbers have the daily price tag at well over $200 million.
We are spending $250 million a day in Afghanistan. That's a rather staggering figure if you stop and consider it, with no end in sight. In fact, if anything, we hear people talk about staying in the place for 10 years. At $250 million a day, that strikes me as ludicrous nonsense, particularly when behind the scenes economists, whether they're on the left or the right, can agree that if we're not already bankrupt, then we're very close to it. So I find that absurd. The second problem with Afghanistan is that we're fighting people who, quite frankly, are strategically irrelevant to us.
Well, if you were president, whether it's a Democratic or Republican administration, what are the first three things you would do to get us in what you consider to be a strong posture of national defense that we can afford?
Liquidate the overseas garrisons. Get out of Iraq and Afghanistan with the overwhelming majority of your conventional combat power. Begin to look at economy of force measures in places like Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia. That is, you have intelligence operatives, occasionally special forces teams, but you absolutely, positively do not want to commit large forces under any circumstances on the ground. Rethink the overseas basing of American air power. There are places where it is useful to have bases, but in many cases we don't need them. As I pointed out in Central Asia, we don't need to have any bases in Africa. We can get largely out of the Middle East. We need to fall back on air and naval power on the periphery of these locations, these places. And if we do need to assist someone or intervene to protect something that is vital to our interests, then we can do so. If we cannot achieve results that are short, sharp, and decisive, then we want to avoid these, because we are, after all, a republic. And democratic republics do not fight long campaigns well. We should not involve ourselves in anything that lasts for very long. We can't do it. It will destroy our prosperity, and after all, that's what's happening today.